Welcome to our alumni Zoom at Elmira College. My name is Sydney Stringham, 19, MSED 21, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement. This event will be recorded for those of you who could not make it in live time. There is a question and answer box at the bottom if any questions come up during this event. As well, there is a chat function if you would like to chat amongst yourselves. And with that, I would like to introduce President Chuck Lindsay.
Thanks, Sydney. And thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. You know, as the president of Elmira College, I've got a chance to meet talented and dedicated alumni of the institution, and there's a lot of them across the country. And tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to Mr. Dick Richardson from the class of 1974. And he's here tonight to talk about how his education at Elmira gave him a springboard to a successful career in the corporate world and as an independent entrepreneur. He followed an interesting career path. He served both as an IBM executive for a number of years and CEO of Experience to Lead, which is an LLC dedicated to leadership development. And the clients he worked with as part of Experience to Lead included Goldman Sachs, Amazon, Federal Reserve Board, US Patent Office, the Royal Canadian Bank, and many others. Right now, he serves as the CEO of SuccessBreaks, and that's a nonprofit offering free content to entrepreneurs. And Dick is also the recipient of 2 US patents in adult learning design. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Dick Richardson from the class of 1974. Dick?
Thank you very much. So what the effect of Elmira College on me really came as a result of the third term of my freshman year, but not the way you'd probably expect. And that is the third term of my freshman year, I decided to take a photography class. And I thought the photography class would be a typical class where you're sitting there and you're learning about f-stops and studio lighting and those kinds of things. But instead, it was very different. And the professor gave us each a Leica 35 millimeter camera, explained to us how it worked and how to load the film and so on, and then told us the assignment was to go out and capture our life at Elmira College through a photograph. And so then when we came back after 2 rolls of film, 72 pictures, how to develop them black and white in the lab, and then we had to select one that we would present to our classmates and to our professor and explain the meaning of that photograph. And so what this was, and I didn't realize it at the time, was experiential learning. In other words, you have an experience, you take a photograph, and you try to create the best photograph you can. And then from that, you have some review of it, some dialogue with someone to assess what's good, what's bad, what did we learn from that? And you form a hypothesis to then go forward and take your next photograph. And so the first time, I'll be honest with you, my photograph was described as soulless and pedantic by a couple of my colleagues. So it wasn't the best piece of work. But I fell in love with photography, and I fell in love with this learning process that the professor was doing instead of sitting us in a lecture hall. And so then when it came to third term for every other year of my time at Elmira, I formed an experiential learning experience of my own. So one year I went over to England with the students who were in education majors with Christ Church College. We had a third term abroad kind of thing going on. But I didn't go over as one of them learning about the English education system. Instead, I went over to look at the intersection of sort of education, sociology, and politics on college students. So I designed the course myself, so to speak. So the experience was going to England and interviewing people, everyone from politicians to students and so on. The next year, I actually spent 10 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever it was at the time up in the wilds of Canada with 3 other guys in a log cabin that was 70 miles from the nearest road. And so I was studying, unbeknownst to them, our sociological interactions between each of us and how we handled the isolation and getting along with one another. And then my final year, if you remember the 70s, and my final third term experience was trying to understand sort of the social impacts of big issues and what graduating college students might have some impact on that. My point of this is that from that first experiential learning process, I learned the experiential learning model, and I felt its impact on me. It affected me in two different ways, personally and professionally. So personally, I'll tell you a quick story about my family, and that is I have three children, a disabled daughter who is our youngest, and she'll be with us forever. But my two older children, when we'd go on vacation like everyone, I would always try to be the person who said there needed to be a learning component to vacation. People like me are known as the fun parents. And not so much fun. But so anyway, what I wanted them to see, though, was the world of work. And so I took them to places where people were working so that they could see all these wonderful and different jobs out there, and that any job is good as long as it puts food on the table and provides for your family and so on. And so I took them to every place from meeting a reporter, doing newspapers, to how they print the papers. We went to Hershey, Pennsylvania to see how they make chocolate. And then the story I want to tell you about is we went to Corning, New York, which is right near Elmira. And we went first to Corning Glass. And then we went to a business that isn't there anymore because it was purchased by Corning, but Steuben Glass. And Steuben Glass made very high-end, beautiful crystal. And so we were on a factory tour of the Steuben glass factory. And if you can imagine on the video here, there's a glass safety wall here, and the tourists like us are on one side and the workers are on the other side producing beautiful crystal. And there was a man who had a crystal bowl like this big, if you can envision this, and he had a hand etcher, and he was drawing a picture on this crystal bowl just out of his talent, just from his head to his hand to the glass. And we were about ready to move on and look at the next exhibit. And he stopped and he held this bowl up and he started looking at it, and he wasn't happy with it. And what happened eventually was he had a 55-gallon drum next to him, and he took the bowl, which was half done, and he held the crystal over and dropped it into the 55-gallon drum. And you could hear this crystal breaking. And we were like, what the heck just happened? You know, this man just threw away his work. But then that generated a set of conversations in my family with my children about work. So the fact that this man didn't have someone standing behind him saying that's not good enough, it was his own standards or company standards. And what is the meaning of work in terms of ethics and performance and standards, and what's good enough and what makes something good, especially at a place like Steuben Glass that's trying to achieve perfection. And so we had a whole series of conversations as a family about that incident. And so we were at the end of the day, we were putting the kids to bed in a hotel in Corning. And I said to my wife, I said, you know, this is what I really wanted to have, was this kind of conversation about work with my children. And she said, you know, I have an idea for you. She said, well, next time, why don't you bring along like some flip charts and markers and Post-it notes? And I thought, this is a great freaking idea. And she said, I'm kidding. She said, can we just go to a water park and like have fun? You know, does everything have to be a learning event, a learning experience? But I have to give her credit, because she then took it to the next step. And that is, you know, the word stupendous. In our family, that doesn't really exist. My wife coined the term stupendous. And stupendous means, from that experience, as good as it can be. So if I were to call my daughter right now and she had a terrific, terrific day, and I would say, Bonnie, how was your day? She would say, it was a stupendous day. And that's the inside lingo in my family about something that's as good as you can make it. So what it is, it's the same process I used with my family and myself that photography teacher used on us. It's, you have an experience, you discuss it, you draw some conclusions and learning from it, and then you apply it to your life in new and different ways. It also affected me professionally in that I tried to get experiential learning into IBM. And to be honest with you, I was marginally successful. corporate environments, they're used to sort of classroom kinds of things in hotels or conference centers or whatever. But after I retired from IBM, I founded Experience to Lead. And the idea was to take senior executives to places where they would have unique experiences that could then affect their ideas and their thoughts and behaviors on leadership. So my first one was I negotiated a Space Act agreement with NASA, and I would take people to Johnson Space Center and Kennedy Space Center and meet with astronauts and flight directors and see these wonderful artifacts, the giant rockets and so on, and then look at the history of NASA, their failures, Apollo 1, Columbia, Challenger, those kinds of things, and their successes, these wonderful achievements. And what can we learn from those? And how does that apply to running Goldman Sachs or the Fed or any other company? So I'm just copying that same learning process that Elmira used on me as a freshman. And the company was pretty successful. I ended up selling it in 2020, but I still look back on that third terms of Elmira College, and I think they had an effect on my whole life. And I'm grateful for that. It's been a good thing for me and hopefully for the people I've touched, both professionally and personally.
I love those stories. Thank you so much for sharing them and your
Sure.
experiences. While we're sitting here for a second, just a reminder to folks that you can submit any questions to Dick in the Q&A, and we will bring them up live for Dick to answer. But we do have one ready for you, Dick. What was the reaction of the C-suite when you first introduced the idea of the experiential outings you mentioned, and were they on board with it, or did it kind of spook them a bit?
No, they weren't on board. People didn't understand what I was trying to do. It's very hard to explain. Why should C-suite executives take 3 days out of their calendars, go to Houston, Texas, and look at giant rockets and meet with astronauts? They see the sizzle, they don't see the steak. And the way I originally got around that was I would offer basically free sessions that were a day and a half, 2 days long, and invite their AAs, or they'd send some HR person or a learning person. And then I would run the session as I normally would for executives and tailor it to those kinds of audiences. And then they would go back and say, oh, no, it's not about space flight. It's about leadership. It's just the metaphor is, it's easier to see the problems other people have in their businesses than it is in your own business. The capstone of that idea is I actually had a fellow in an Apollo program at Houston, who on the second day, we were talking about the difficulties that NASA had and some of the tragedies and so on. And he was from a very high financial company. And he actually said this. He actually said, yeah, but going to the moon is a pretty straightforward thing. Our business is really complicated. And I mean, I just about fell out of my chair. I mean, there's nothing more complicated than throwing people off this planet and trying to get them someplace else. So, but once they see it, then it catches on. Like when eBay is a great example. When John Donahoe came, and he's the CEO, then he immediately signed up for 13 more programs for the people underneath him, the executives underneath him. So you have to get them you have to lead them to water and then get them to drink a little bit. And then once they taste the Kool-Aid, we're good.
Well, yeah, as soon as you mentioned NASA, I lit up because I want to know what your favorite experiential outing with your group was at NASA. What happened and what did you do?
Oh, my favorite one at NASA. Oh boy, that's a tough one. I guess my favorite one was there was an astronaut who almost drowned in outer space. Luca Palmitano is an Italian astronaut who was on a spacewalk at the International Space Station. And I knew that story. And when we go to NASA, I had special permission to take people to the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, where astronauts practice spacewalks underwater. It's the largest pool in the world. And so we were there, and as they call them, subjects, the astronauts that were practicing, came out of the water as we were there on the deck And sure enough, one of the astronauts is Luca Palmitano. And they came over and they asked me, obviously I was leading the group, and they said, who are you? What are you doing here? And I explained who we were. And I said, are you Luca Palmitano? And he said, yes. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm meeting this person. And it's a great story. It's such a great story that I actually funded a company out in Houston to make a video about that, and how he and his colleague on the spacewalk survived that. He almost died. I mean, he was within probably a minute of dying. But it was just to see him and to meet him, and all the other, these were all my childhood heroes. Okay. And I get to see him and talk to him.
That would be so cool. We have a question from Michael. He says, if you went back to Elmira College with a camera, what would your one photo show?
Oh my gosh. I think my one photo would show the student center. And that was the place where everything happened, not just socially, but it opened my eyes in so many ways. I'll give you a real quick one. Right now on college campuses, there's a lot of controversy about students and sometimes even faculty not wanting people to come and speak on college campuses. And I can remember very clearly when in the student center, we had at the time a very radical person come and speak. And this was, I'm trying to think of her name. She was the first man to actually transition to be a woman. And because the operation wouldn't be done in the United States, she had to go to Sweden. And so after she came back, this was a radical thing in those days. It wasn't like now where you read about it every day. And Elmira invited her to come and speak. And there were people who thought we shouldn't be doing this. The great part about this for Elmira, though, is, and the place was filled. The upstairs, they cleared it out. I mean, it was packed with people to hear her. 2 weeks later, they also invited representatives from, you don't hear about them anymore, but the John Birch Society, which is a radical conservative organization. And they also were invited by Elmira College to come and speak. And no one protested against these things. People came disliking them, not agreeing, but listening. And so that to me was the essence of a true liberal education, is that you're open to new ideas. It's not left or right. Liberal means open to new ideas. And here Elmira was offering not only to the college students, but also to the community, come and hear the most extreme things, but come to listen. And those two things were 2 weeks with one another. And I thought, holy cow, this is an amazing, amazing learning experience.
Wow. That's great. I love the perspective on that. And I think that's one unique thing EC really has, is that liberal arts experience and the experiential learning that you don't really get everywhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
We do have a question from Justin. He says, what advice do you have for young/recent Elmira College graduates who want to succeed professionally in today's economy?
So I have to tell you, my first job out of Elmira College, I graduated, the unemployment rate was 7%. And it was really bad economy. And my first job was working in a Sherwin-Williams paint store. Okay. And from there, I looked at that as a learning experience to then eventually go to IBM and so on. Recently, a classmate of mine retired in Brussels, and he was one of the most senior people in the EU regarding labor unions and across European borders. And so anyway, he and I had dinner over in Brussels, and we were catching up. I hadn't seen him since college. And his first job coming out of Elmira, he couldn't get a job in the government like he wanted. And he worked in a hardware store in San Francisco. And from there, got involved with the labor movement in San Francisco, and then moved on up, and then eventually over to Europe, where he was labor relations for the EU government. So, my advice is, don't look down on those jobs. Everything is just a stepping stone to wherever you want to go. And I look back at Sherwin-Williams, and he looked back at this hardware store, and it's like, thank God we did that, rather than sitting around and waiting for opportunity to come to us.
All right, and we have a question from Richard. He says, curious how you got to Elmira College, especially as it had just become co-ed. Was it a big leap of faith?
I wish I could say it was the school I really wanted to go to, and I studied all and compared it. But the honest truth is, I grew up near Alfred University, and my sister went to Alfred University, and I was accepted there and offered a scholarship. And I really didn't want to go to my sister's school. And so my guidance counselor said, hey, Elmira is opening up to guys. Why don't you go up and interview there? Just take a look at it. So I went up and I looked at it. I really liked it. And Elmira accepted me, but they didn't offer me anything. And so I told my mother, I said, well, I guess because of money, because we didn't have any money. I said, I guess I'll go to Alfred. And she said, if I were you, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call Elmira and make them bid. And so I did. I called up Elmira admissions and I said, I have this, I'd love to go to Elmira, but Alfred offered me this scholarship. And they said, how much did they offer? So I told them, they said, we'll call you back in an hour. Well, they called back in about 20 minutes and said, we'll match them and we'll go a little bit above them. And so off we go. I mean, that's just, I didn't want to go where my sister went. And then I never regretted that I ended up going to Elmira, because I was also farther away from home. It turned out to be a good thing for me.
And then we have a comment from Rick Graham. He says, I was one of the 3 guys that went with you to Canada, and it was a great experience.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Rick. He is a terrific guy. And his girlfriend at the time, Marcy, I remember him dearly. He is a wonderful man. Tell him he has to connect with me, because I've connected with other guys that have went on that trip with us. So that's nice. I have an endorsement that, in fact, we did that.
He's not making this up, guys. It's real life.
Yeah.
Question from Jane. Would you please describe your adult learning design patents?
Oh, okay. So the idea is that, children will learn anything. They're just like sponges. But adults are very discriminating. And what I believe, and the research shows, is that adults seek relevancy. In other words, how relevant is this topic or this idea to me? And they tend to discard things that they don't see as relevant. So the idea behind the patents is 2 things. One is the theoretical side of it, and that is, how do you determine what learning an adult needs, particularly as a leader, is where I was focusing, and then make that learning relevant so that they want to consume it, rather than coming to learning as a prisoner. They come as a volunteer. And then I actually worked with a number of software engineers and programmers to create a program that could take personality, psychometric instruments, career profiles, self-reports, and other kinds of instruments, to then be able to analyze that and come out with a prescriptive curriculum for a leader that says, here are the things that would give you the most leverage to make you a better leader and promotable within the company. So there's the theoretical side of it is one patent, and the actual application is the other one.
Okay, well, with that, how did you transition from experiential outings for executives to developing learning patents, or was it the other way around?
It was the other way around. I was trying to figure out at IBM how to engage executives at a deeper level. Part of it is experiential learning. Part of it is relevancy. Part of it is timing in their careers, those kinds of things. So it was all trying to figure out all those different dynamics and things vectoring in on how willing is the executive to open their mind to new ideas and to new behaviors, and then trying to figure out a way to capitalize on those that are the biggest levers. And then I just fell in love with experiential learning anyway, just because I think it's the natural way we all learn. When you meet people and you say, how did Chuck, when we first met, And he told me about his background. And he was explaining how that got him to Elmira and how we end up together. So it's a natural way that we learn to progress in our careers and in our lives and our relationships. So.
Okay. Now, in these trainings, is it difficult for CEOs not to try and run the learning experience on their own?
I always have, when I have a CEO there, I always have a private conversation with them about an hour before the program starts. And I try to help them understand their role. And their role is to step back and to be a leader and to ask the best questions and to stay away from declarative statements. Some leaders can do that, and some have real difficulty. You know, they're used to being, sort of Kirk on the Starship Enterprise. And you got to get them out of that mode. And sometimes I actually have to have them step away. I mean, I'll put people into groups or something, and I'll say to the CEO, hey, come over with me. I want to show you something special. I'm really just trying to get him or her out of the discussion so that people can have a real conversation.
Speaking of Captain Kirk and captains, the description for this event mentioned that you were on the plane that landed on the Hudson.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
So I refused to move to corporate headquarters for IBM because I have a disabled daughter here in Charlotte, and I didn't want to disrupt the family. So I had an office here in Charlotte, but my real office was in Armonk. So I always went back and forth between the two. I've made that flight from Charlotte to New York probably, I don't know, my wife and I figure over 1,500 times. And so I was just coming home from some business meetings in New York. I was supposed to fly out on Friday, but the meetings ended early. So I thought, Thursday I can get on a plane. And if there had been a snowstorm that morning, so I thought if I can catch it, I will. And if not, I'll stay at the Marriott across the street from LaGuardia. And luckily or unluckily, I caught the plane. And so I happened to be on Sully's flight, and we hit the darn birds. And next thing I know, I'm standing on the wing in the Hudson River, just frozen. And so, but it goes back to where I started, and this is, I've looked at that experience and say, what did I get out of it? And I mean, I can tell you funny stories about it now. And because I've tried to glean from it, what was the good things? And I've met Sully. I could pull up some photographs and stuff, but I mean, I've met Sully, and he and I have had dinner and stuff and talked about it. I really admire his calmness, his courage, and certainly his skill. Jeff Skiles doesn't give enough credit. He was the co-pilot. But also the passengers, we all helped one another. You think everybody, it's going to be every man for themselves and yelling and screaming, and it wasn't that at all. It wasn't that at all. And I'm willing to talk about any of the experiences. I mean, some of it really is funny. I don't know how much time we have. We only have a couple minutes, I guess, left, but.
Well, if you want to go into some, we can do a final call for questions in the Q&A, and we'll listen to your stories. And if any other questions pop up, I will let you know.
Okay, I'll tell you one funny story that's a pretty good one, and that is, so I ended up on the starboard wing, and different boats responded. So we were all picked up by different things, and every boat, I always say the boats went home. So if you got picked up by the dinner cruise boat, it goes to the dinner cruise dock. Air Sea Rescue goes to Air Sea Rescue. I got picked up by a ferry, and so you go to the ferry terminal. But you get very focused on your immediate problems. I mean, the water in front, I didn't know how to swim. Okay. And here I am. I just got out of an airplane crash. I step out on the wing. I say, God, you're just throwing this shit at me way too fast. And I thought I was going to drown. So anyway, I get picked up by the ferry boat, and you get all turned around, and I'm sopping wet, and I'm frozen. And we're getting to the ferry terminal, and I mean, it was all lights, blue lights, red lights. There were EMTs, nurses, doctors, state police, National Guard. I mean, everybody was there, and they couldn't wait to get at us. And before we even docked, they were jumping across the gap to get at us passengers. And this state policeman came up and grabbed me, and he said, "I'm Angelo from the state police. Were you on the airplane?" And I mean, like, I'm sopping wet from the waist down. It's like, good guess. And I said, yeah. And he said, are you injured? And I said, no, I'm just really cold, but I'm not injured. And so I said, Angelo, I didn't know where we were. I got disoriented. And so I said, Angelo, where are we? And he says, you're in Weehawken. And I said, no, Angelo, where are we right now? And he says, Weehawken. And I said, no, Angelo, where is this place? I'm confused. And he said, you are in Weehawken, New Jersey, United States of America. And I'm like, Jersey, how did I end up in Jersey? I'm thinking I'm on the Manhattan side. And but he had to tell me United States of America. So he thought I got canked on the head or something, And I'm like, what he was saying was Weehawken. And so I ended up in Weehawken ferry terminal, and then from there moved on. But I mean, it's funny how you make assumptions about what has happened to people, and how they're responding to your questions and the interactions, and then you draw conclusions. And his conclusions were all wrong. I actually was pretty good. I just didn't know where I was.
Did you stay in touch with any of the other passengers?
There is a group, a secret Yahoo group that I say secret because you have to know it's a closed private group, and we do stay in touch. I'm not a real joiner for those kinds of things, so I stay in touch a little bit. I had a woman who worked for me who was also on the flight. Matter of fact, it was her first business trip with me, and so she and I stay in touch. But it's interesting that different people handle these kinds of experiences in different ways. Some of them want to get together every January 15th on the anniversary and, toast that we survived. There was a woman I met on the wing, which is another fascinating story. And I would say we helped each other. And then afterwards, she lives in Charlotte. And so she asked me to get together with her to have a cup of coffee. So we did that. We did that twice. And then she asked me to come and have a cup of coffee again. And so I met with her, and she didn't order coffee. And so she said, I just wanted to meet you to tell you that I've been seeing someone to help me. I was seeing a therapist about the experience. And she said, I need to put it behind me, which means I don't want to ever talk to you again. But she said, I wanted to tell you that in person rather than just send a text or something. So some people want to stay in touch and relive the fact that we were victorious in the face of catastrophe. And other people have to respond by saying, I need to tuck that away someplace and move on. So it affects each one of us differently.
Wow. Ooh. One final question, back to patents. To whom did you license your educational patent?
So I was working for IBM at the time. And so as an IBM employee, IBM owns my patents. So any revenue from the patents does not come to me. I have a very nice plaque on my wall, and that's all I got. Okay.
I'll cherish that plaque forever.
Yeah, I'd rather have the money, but that's okay.
Okay, and then we did have one final comment. Can Dick give me his contact information? By the way, my girlfriend Marcy is my wife of 49 years from Rick Graham.
Oh,
and yes, if you guys want to reach out to us at alumni@elmira.edu, we can forward any questions to Dick and he can get in contact with you. So no worries there. And if you're watching this at a later date and time, just feel free to email us and we can get those to Dick. This has been a great chat and we really appreciate your time, Dick. And anyone out there who has not registered for reunion, that is a great time to come back and reconnect, and we hope to see you all there. You can register online at almira.edu. And I just want to thank you so much for your time, Dick, and all of this exciting things. We went from one drastic event to the other, and I think it shows the well-rounded liberal arts of your life.
That's right. That's right.
But with that, I'd like to pass it over to President Lindsay for the final remarks, and thank you all again for coming.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Dick, you'll be happy to know that the experiential learning component is still alive and well at Elmira College. And now we talk about the liberal arts in combination with giving students professional skills and then hands-on learning. So we think it's an award-winning combination. I'm so delighted that it had such an impact on you. It was great to, you really embody, I think, the message that you gave tonight. And it was a delight. You embody your work. I guess that's how I'd put it. So much appreciation for all the stories you shared tonight. And thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. And Sydney, we're going to be doing more of these in the fall. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have some things up our sleeve, President Lindsay.
Okay, well, that's good. Of course, Dick has now set a very high bar. So good night, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.